Hello and welcome to Ingram Micro presents the new HPE Aruba CX5420. My name is Brandon Atchley and I'm a technical solution engineer here at Ingram Micro, focused on anything under the HPE Aruba umbrella. Before we dive into the content, I want to go over some resources you have at Ingram Micro. We have an email alias, a catch-all for everything under HPE Aruba, that is hpearuba@ingrammicro.com. That can help you with things like quotes, orders, ETAs, tracking, and renewals. Next, we have our solutions, design, and services. This is our technical resources. So you have myself, Brandon Atchley at ingrammicro.com. You have one of my colleagues, John Bushart, who is a technical enablement engineer in our Business Transformation Center, who runs a demo lab of the entire HPE stack from server storage to networking. So it encompasses the wired and wireless of the CX portfolio we're talking about today. His email alias is john.bushart@ingrammicro.com. And then we have our solution design and services technical phone team that can be reached at 800-445-5066, extension 77472. Moving down, we have our business development specialists, and these are some of our associates that can help you with things like Aruba's programs and promotions. They're more of a proactive group that can help you escalate deals, get better pricing, help you, get the resources needed to close them. And we have Stephanie Finucane, Mike Herb, and Connor Pierce. And then to the right side of the screen, we have a QR code to our Microsoft's booking page. By scanning this, it'll take you to the page that can book time with myself, John Bushart, or any of the three business development reps that I've mentioned here. So if you have any questions or you need any assistance, please don't hesitate to reach out and book some time today. Now, if you're familiar with the HPE Aruba portfolio, you might have seen a portfolio chart similar to this. This is the entirety of the CX portfolio, starting with the ruggedized 4100, ending on the CX10K data center steer switch. With the new 5420 release, we now have a chart that looks more like this. It looks a little busy in the middle there, but the 5420 now adds a lower port density chassis that's kind of fitting in line right under the 6300 and right above the 6200. The 5420 chassis is a layer 3 chassis offering BGP, OSPF, RIP, and PIM type features, routing protocols. It has 6 slots. There is no word on a 12 slot variant coming out. So right now the 6 slot is what we have. It does offer the VSX HA configuration, so you can essentially stack or high availability 2 of the chassis together. The modules do have the capability of doing MACsec. However, on release, they are not functioning. It will be a software release later to enable that. Just like the rest of the CX portfolio, they do come with a limited lifetime warranty with options for advanced tax support. And they do have the programmability interface that the rest of the CX operating system provides you. The new upgrades gives you things like Class 8 PoE and a whole slew of new modules that we will get into. Now here's a closer look at the chassis from the front and the back. So if you're familiar with the older 54 ZL2 or 5400R ZL2 chassis, these are a very similar footprint in their half-width line cards. They have the ability to do 2 management modules. However, if you look at the rear of the chassis, there is a new configuration for the fans and the power supplies, now supporting up to 4 power supplies and 1 single fan tray that comprises of 4 fans. This is only for you, so it is a very compact chassis, but it does offer up to 144 ports, giving you a pretty decent large port density in a small form factor. And you'll see if you look, there's certain specifications provided here as far as like the processor, just kind of going over different port density, the PoE wattage. Now this gives us a look at where the 5400R chassis series that we currently have out is migrating to. So for a 5406R, the 6 slot variant, that is going to be a 1-to-1 over to the 5420. For the 5412R, if you're doing a lower port density configuration, you might be able to fit it into the new 5420. However, for larger port densities, we are going to be still looking to go over the 6400 series. 6400 series, honestly, was a little bit larger of a chassis compared to the 5400. So this is just a nice kind of stepping stone to offer a lower port density, lower cost model compared to the 6400. Now here is a kind of a side-by-side comparison from the 5400R and the 5420. So if you look at some of the dimensions of the overall chassis, you're going to see that they are very similar, almost exactly the same in terms of length, width, and height and depth. A bit smaller, but in reality, in the rack, you're not going to really notice too much of a difference. Now looking at some of the modules offered. So in the 1 gig base T modules, we have a 24 port with standard PoE. We have a 24 port non-PoE. We have a 20 port PoE with 4 10 gig uplinks, and they are LRM transceiver compatible. And then we have a new module, which is 20 ports, 1 gig PoE with 2 SFP 28 25 gig uplinks, giving it improved feature and functions. Then if we look down at the new smart rate modules, we have a 16 port that can do 1, 2.5, and 5 gigs, PoE at class 6, which is 60 watts. And then we have an 8 port smart rate module that does 1, 2.5, 5, and 10 gig at PoE class 8, which is up to 90 watts. So this is very similar to a module we previously had, which was 8 ports. However, it's improved as far as class 8 90 watt PoE. And then looking at the optical modules, we have an 8 port 10 gig SFP plus that is LRM capable, along with a 24 port 1 gig SFP module. Now the call out for the LRM is some of the CX series switching does not support LRM modules. So we just want to highlight and call out that these are LRM capable. And all MACsec capable, just needing a future software release to enable it. Now a quick look at the CX portfolio and how the stacking or high availability works. So there's kind of 3 categories here. We have hot patching, VSX live upgrade, and ISSU, which is in-service software upgrade. So if we look at the CX portfolio, all of the models supports hot patching, which is minor, firmware upgrades or releases that you can do without restarting or bringing down the unit. The VSX live upgrade is a capability for the high availability stacking that certain series, mainly the data center series or the chassis models. So if you look at the chart, you'll see the 5420 does support it along with the 6400. So those are both our chassis series. And then anything 8000 series above also supports it because that's the high availability connectivity method to connect 2 units together and, get special features as far as like upgrading the firmware without bringing down the entire set of switches. And then you have the in-service software upgrade supported on the 63 and the 6400 series. To call out, the 63 is in the stacking when you stack multiple switches, and then the 6400 when you have 2 of them in VSX. Essentially, you can push out the software upgrades without having any type of downtime associated with it. And then the last call out I want to make is that the 6300 does have a 6300L variant that does not support the in-service software upgrades. Alrighty, so that is that for the presentation portion of this. Now we're going to switch over to Iris. Alrighty, so if you're not familiar with Iris, Iris is the configuration tool that Aruba uses for pretty much any of their products within their portfolio. Iris is a very powerful tool with multi-vendor support. As you can see in mine, I do actually have Juniper in here as well, along with some of the storage networking switches in the HPE world, and things like rack and power. But as far as Aruba, it is a very complete platform encompassing all of the products that they offer. We can definitely reach out to me if you want a more in-depth look at Iris or more in-depth tutorial. There is multiple ways you can navigate to your products. You can drill down through top menus. There's the HPE Aruba networking. We can drill down and we have multiple tabs within here. So if we were looking for the 5420 chassis that we're looking for, we can manually drill down and find it this way. Or because we know exactly what we're looking for, we can just simply go to the search and type in the 5420 gives us a number of options. However, we can easily find our 5420 here. And to add it and start configuring it, we'll just simply double click. This will add it to our essentially our site, our workbench that we can start configuring from. The cool thing about Iris is as you're configuring it, it actually does give you the ability to have a live view of the chassis and how you're configuring things like redundant management module or the different line cards within the chassis. So just as an example, I'm going to populate the second management module slot. I always highly recommend configuring the chassis with 2 management modules. Drop that in the configuration. And as you can see on the build, that module, that line card was automatically added. Now it is a 6-slot chassis, so we have 6 I/O slots that we can configure with the different line cards. So we were going to move over to our I/O slots, and this is what allows you to configure all of the line cards. Shows you all of your options. We have a number of non-TAA modules along with the number of TAA modules. So if TAA is a requirement for your build, right, you have the capability of selecting the TAA variants. And as far as the modules concerned, all the modules that I covered in the presentation are here. We have our 24-port non-PoE, 24-port PoE. We have our 20-port PoE with the 10 gig ports uplink for SFP+. We have the 20-port PoE with our two 25 gig SFP28 uplink, along with our 2 smart rate modules, 8 and 16 ports, and our 2 SFP modules for the 24 ports and the 8 ports that support up to 1 or 10 gig. And yet again, these are supporting LRM. So now I will go through my configuration and I will add the modules in. So let's just start with a 24-port PoE. Once we configure that, we will see that dropped it into the chassis configuration. We'll just go through and do kind of a number of these. Let's do the 8-port SFP Plus. We'll do the 8-port Smart Rate 10 gig. Let's see. We'll also do the 20-port with 2 and 20-port with 4 uplinks. So we can see all of our options are configured here. The cool thing about the configuration tool is we also have the ability to go in and configure any of the modules. So if you have any transceivers, modules like SFP Plus or uplinks that we need to configure, we can do that through here as well. So we will jump into, let's say, our 8-port module. It'll highlight on the visibility panel here the module that we're configuring, and we get all the configuration options for all the transceivers that we have available. So if we wanted to maybe throw in some SR 10 gig transceivers, we can just add 4 in. It'll populate that in the line card so you can see it live as you're configuring it so you know how many you have left. We will drop over to our line card that actually has the 25 gig uplinks on here to show you that it's a little bit different with only 2 slots. It actually just gives you a drop down that you can navigate through to figure out which transceivers you're looking for, but we have all of our options for our 20 gig transceivers. 25 gig transceivers. So if we're looking, give a comparable 25 gig SR transceiver for multi-mode, we'll drop that in. And just for the heck of it, we will do our single mode as well. And you notice it'll call out the red versus the yellow just to show you, multi-mode versus single mode. Now moving back up to the chassis level, we will switch over to our power options because we do have 2 different options for power supplies. We have 1 option for power supply, but 2 different powering options for the power supply. We have a low line power, so think of low voltage. When plugged into a low voltage outlet, you're going to get 1,000 watts per power supply. And when you're plugged into high line, something like high voltage, 200, 240 watt or voltage, you're going to get 1,600 watts of power. This is very important because this is going to determine the amount of PoE power that you have on the chassis, depending on the power source you're plugging the chassis into. There's a few different options we can do. We can look at things like related products. If we wanted to add in Aruba Central for cloud management, we can do that from here. We have related services. These are things like the higher touch professional services or deployment services, things like that. And then we also have an accessory tab that we can utilize to configure things like our direct attach cables for 10 gig, 25 gig, or different modules for maybe the management, or maybe we need a 4-post rack mount kit. We can add that through this as well. So let's just, for the sake of it, let's add our 4-post kit. Now there's two more panels that we have here. We have the attributes. This is going to allow us to do like a multiplier. So if we want to just do two of the chassis, we can multiply it here. It'll ask us if we want all of our accessories multiplied as well. So this would be creating a complete duplicate version of the chassis. We're going to just say no here. Let's move that back down to 1. We don't need 2 for this. And this page is also pretty cool because it gives us things like power consumption, heat, airflow, showing us its front to back, and the different dimensions. And this is through the entire portfolio we can get this data. And then the last messages panel is just going to give us a brief summary of what we're doing and any error messages. So if we're configuring something incorrectly, it'll alert you here as well. Now that we've completed our configuration for the chassis, the last thing would be to figure out what type of support we want to live on the chassis, and that's going to be added through this little plus button up here. When we click the plus button, we get this new window that pops up, and it gives us a large variety of our support options. So we can see that we have Aruba Central support next business day. We have an option for TAC only support, however, it's not available for the chassis. And then we have things like the next business day exchange, 4-hour exchange, then we have our on-sites, and we can go and see all the different options. For something like this, we might be looking at maybe a 4-hour exchange option. It's typically a core switch, so there's more importance around it. If it's the core of your entire network, you might want to do something like a 4-hour on site to make sure that an engineer is doing the swap out and making sure that you are good to go when they leave. So let's add the 4-hour on site here. You can see it added down here. Shows us the cost. So if we're kind of trying to be focus on the pricing, make sure we're fitting in the budget, we can see that down here. Now to end it all, we're going to hit the little money icon here. This is our quote. So we pull that open and it'll show us the entire build and MSRP list price of the configuration. So the first part number we have is the chassis. Then the support falls right under the chassis. Now with the chassis series switches, the individual line cards or modules that you're installing inside the chassis don't put support on. It all rolls up under the chassis level support, which is amazing, great thing that you don't have to worry about power supplies or individual cards having their own support. We did configure this with 4 power supplies, so it shows us the quantity 4. Now with anything with a power supply that has a cord coming with it, you have the designation for type of cord. I didn't actually cover that, so let's actually close out of this and go back there. So if we look down here, the power cord selection, we have this little drop-down menu. So if we need to do something like a PDU style power cord, we can select B2B for PDU. If this is going another country that needs another different style power cord, we have a number of options for different power cords. Or if we just don't want it to include a power cord at all, we can do AC3, and that'll come with no power cord in the box. One of the most common options for our switches is going to be ABA. That's a typical NEMA style power cord. However, for a chassis configuration like this, we might more likely be plugging into a PDU, and we're going to be doing the B2B type power cord. Now we'll open our quote menu one more time, finish going through it. We have our second management module. Now the chassis itself includes a management module, so we don't need the first one. We don't need to quote that separately. However, if we want redundancy, we have a management module that we added. We have the line cards that we added. However, it's broken up with any type of transceivers to kind of coincide exactly with the module that you installed it in. So you can see down here, or to the left here, the line numbers. This is showing you each line number. So the chassis, of course, is going to be 1. Everything underneath it is essentially going inside of that, except when we get to 2 here, that is actually the 4-post rack kit that is actually going with it. So if you see 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, these are separate line cards that are going inside this main unit. And then we might have something like 1.6.1 because this is actually going into the card above it, 1.6, that is going into 1.0. And the same thing with 1.8, 1.81 and 1.82. Those are being plugged into 1.8. And this will give you your pricing list and all of your part numbers. And it does have a few different methods. You can export it to Excel. That's typically the common format that I see it. Or you can even go back and just save your overall Iris config. So you can open this config and use it if it's a template that you use going in the future. And that's a wrap. That is all we have on the Aruba CX5420. I really appreciate you watching to the end. My name is Brandon Atchley, and until next time.